going on, everybody? It's Aurora coming at you with a brand new video, and as a lot of you might know, the Gardevoir EX League Battle Deck just released today as of recording this video, yesterday as of this video going up, and funnily enough, that perfectly seemed to coincide with the fact that today I wanted to bring to y'all my Gardevoir deck profile for the Temporal Forces format post-rotation. Now, I'm no stranger to Gardevoir at all. I've been playing this deck for quite a while, since back in Sword and Shield era. I was playing like the Buddy Catch Gallade and Shining Arcana Gardevoir combo deck. It sucked, by the way. It was really bad. But then when Gardevoir EX came out, I started playing that back when it was like really strong and full power. But now, of course, with rotation, the deck has gotten significantly weaker, considering it lost like 10 different cards. But honestly, it doesn't even really matter too much in terms of the deck's like actual viability. Yes, it's not as strong as it once was, and it's not seeing the like meta dominant representation. However, I still think it is a very solid deck, and it even managed to hit 9th place at the EUIC in the Masters Division, which was really cool. And I think that this deck can do some really good numbers on other decks, and it can be really helpful for those of you that have picked up your Gardevoir EX League Battle deck, especially if you're just getting into the game, and you're looking for a way to upgrade the deck yourself. With that being said, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get right into my Gardevoir EX deck profile for the Temporal Forces format. Starting off, of course, with our Ralt Gardevoir line, we have 3 copies of Teleportation Burst Ralts, 1 copy of Memory Skip Ralts, 4 copies of the Refinement Kirlia, 2 copies of Gardevoir EX, and I am playing 1 copy of Buddy Catch Gallade. This is pretty standard, honestly, not too much to say here. I know the structure gives you 4 copies of the Memory Skip Ralts, which isn't awful. I do like the extra 10 HP on the Teleportation Burst Ralts, though, and also that Teleportation Burst can come up in certain situations to tag out into things like Mimikyu. With Mirage Step Kirlia gone, it's basically just standard to play 4 copies of the Refinement Kirlia. It can help you dig for some more things, and then 2 Gardevoir EX is 2 Gardevoir EX. But the 1 Buddy Catch Gallade, I know a lot of people aren't really, like, considering the Buddy Catch Gallade. I've seen a couple of lists with it, but I actually really like it as a card. It allows a lot of flexibility in the supporters you can play. You can play less copies of them because you can just straight up search them, and it allows you to play some, like, more niche one-of-ones. I was experimenting with Airy, for example, though I did end up cutting it. But I do like that it is a pretty competent one-prize attacker. I mean, 160 damage is nothing to scoff at, especially against other single-prize decks. You can KO a Roaring Moon without a capsule, for example, or you can just do 160 and then hit it with Lost Vacuum if it does have the capsule, which I actually did last night, which was fun. And then you get to move your energy down to something like your Gardevoir, because a lot of people like to try and boss trap Gardevoir because they want you to put more damage counters on her, so it's more easy for them to knock her out. But you can just transfer the energy over to Gardevoir and then make her able to retreat normally. You can also attach it to things like the Memory Skip Ralts to get that live, or something you can do in case your little supporter mons get boss trapped, you know, like your Luminion, Radiant Greninja, Manaphy, Jirachi. You can just transfer the energy over to one of them, and that means you can just retreat them for free. I think it has a lot of uses, though it definitely isn't like a mandatory thing to play, but I have been really enjoying it. For our main hitters, we're playing 2 copies of Drifloon and 1 Screamtail. This is also pretty standard here now. So Drifloon, funnily enough, was not in older Gardevoir back like before rotation, and that's mainly because, you know, you had Zacian and Arcanivore to be your main hitters. But funnily enough, after playing with Drifloon now, I think I like Drifloon a lot more than either of them when it comes to actually hitting things. So the big thing with Arcanivore was that you really couldn't juice her up very much to do a lot of damage with just Psychic Embrace, unless you gave her an item, or a tool, sorry, which, I mean, of course you're going to give to the Drifloon anyway. But then when it came to, like, Zacian, for example, Zacian could hit really hard, but then you'd end up trading the 2 prizes back immediately, similar to, like, Roaring Moon's Frenzied Gouging, right, where you do 200 to yourself, and so next turn they kind of just guaranteed kill you. And so it really didn't feel great, not to mention that you had to attach, like, all 9 energy to Zacian just for its attack to one-shot a Charizard, whereas in here, you only have to attach, like, what, it's like 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, you only have to attach 6 energy, 5 if you use a damage pump, which I'm not currently on, I'll say that, and it only trades for a single prize. Yes, it makes the deck weaker to things like Lost Vacuum, but not everybody's on Lost Vacuum, or they would rather use it on certain other things, so it's not like a super big problem, and I know some people are only playing like the 1 Drifloon, but I really like the second one, and then I end up shuffling them back and using them a third time a lot of the time. And then, of course, Screamtail is Screamtail. You are going to be sniping a lot of bench stuff with this. Things like Baxcalibur is a really big one in the Chin-Pow matchup because it can do 160 base. But you can also juice it up with a cape similarly to Drifloon, and even attack active Pokemon with it for a very intimidating amount of damage. For some of our supporter mon, we actually have a few psychic ones that are really helpful for the deck. With Mimikyu, Fluttermane, and Klefki, I think all of these cards are very, very strong for the deck. Klefki is something that I am experimenting with now. I did end up playing something else for a while until now. But basically, these two are similar in that they stop the Lost Box matchup really, really well. And then Mimikyu is very good against a lot of other matchups like, you know, Charizard, things like Chin-Pow. Oh my god, this literally just completely won me a whole game against Chin-Pow. He could not out it. It was so funny. But there's just a lot of applications that these cards can have in order to help you stall and set up some more stuff. Things like your Curlias in case you don't see access to your TM Evos. This is a blind second Arven deck, by the way, with TM Evo. And then you have like the Klefki and Fluttermane to kind of just completely shut off the Lost Box matchup so you don't get outpaced. And then what's really cool is that because these are psychics, well, not so much Klefki because attack sucks, but because these are psychics, you can actually use their attacks in these matchups. So in the Chin-Pow matchup or the Charizard matchup, you can chip away at the EX Pokemon with the Mimikyu's Ghost Eye ability, putting 7 damage counters, which can make it easier for something like a Drifloon to come in and KO it. And then you have things like the Fluttermane, which is amazing in the Lost Box matchup, because if you start with the Fluttermane, they're going to probably start with a Comfy, and then they're going to not really be able to do much of anything. And then on your turn, if you can set up like everything you need, you can just easily go Hex Hurl, do 90, knock out a Comfy, and then place 2 on something like a Cramorant, because that means that this will be able to KO a Cramorant in one hit afterwards, or you can even just start placing damage counters on things like the Giratina. Overall, really, really great supporter mons because they can also help you attack. We have a few more non-psychic supporter mons here. We have the one Radiant Greninja, which this coming in the League Battle deck is huge. This card was actually kind of pricey for a Pokemon staple for a while, but now it is extremely accessible due to the League Battle deck, which is awesome. And something that I cut last night, but then immediately put back in when I realized how much I missed it, was the one Luminion V. So, because this is a blind second Arven deck with TM Evo, you really want to access Arven as much as possible, because if you don't see Arven and you blind second in this deck, you're kind of just praying you sit on a supporter mon, because you kind of just gave your opponent a whole turn to start getting set up while you're just sitting there doing nothing. And that ended up showing in one of my matches against Meowscarada. I had like a whole bench set up of a bunch of basics with TM Evo in hand, but like no way to get an energy or anything. And if I had access to Arven off of the Luminion because I had Ultra Ball in hand, then it wouldn't have been a problem in the slightest. Yes, it is a little bit of a liability, especially because you're usually trying to focus on your single prize attackers like Drifloon and Screamtail getting knocked out. So if they boss this in and KO it or KO it on the bench or something, that is an extra prize for him. That does make it a little bit of a problem. And I'm not playing Collapse Stadium in this list like some other Gardevoir lists are, so I can't just easily get rid of it. But we are playing Professor Turos if that is a problem. Like if you think they're gonna boss pull this up or something, you can do kind of like what they did on the Orlando regional stream, and it was Charizard versus Ancient Box, where you just go Turos, bounce the liability mon, and now there is not really a problem. And finally, to wrap up the supporter mons, we have the one Manaphy and one Jirachi. You are playing a stage 2 deck, you do want to protect your bench as much as possible, and these two do an excellent job. That is it for the Pokemon. Moving on to the supporters, as I mentioned, 4 copies of Arven here. Basically like the main supporter you want to see, main card you want to see in hand. Gets everything live by grabbing Earthen Vessel and TM Evo, and also in the late game grabbing your tools like your Bravery Charms and your Capes are really awesome. And we're also playing 2 copies of Iono. I really want to play another copy. I was playing 3 at one point, but I just couldn't really find the space for anything, especially because there is other things that I do want to add, things like the damage pump and stuff that I'll also have to find stuff to cut anyways. So Iono at 2 does feel fine because we are playing the Buddy Catch, and we are playing Palpad to recycle them back, though it might be nice to play a 3rd because in Gardevoir you can easily loop Iono while utilizing your discard resources. And then finally, for some miscellaneous little supporters, we're playing the 1 Turos and the 1 Boss's Orders. So Boss's Orders I'll talk about real quick. I'm only playing the 1 because you can easily recycle it with Palpad and stuff, and it's easily searchable. And we're also playing Counter Catcher anyway, so it's not a big deal. But the Turos I know is a little bit like niche in Gardevoir specifically, because I mean, other than picking up your Gardevoir, it's not like super crazy. But a really, really cool thing you can do is that a lot of people they'll end up trying to boss trap you, right? Like, say you have to load all of your energy up onto a Drifloon to knock out like a really big stage 2, and you're just sitting there with a Drifloon in the active, and then they end up using boss, and they force something like the Greninja or the Jirachi or whatever up into the active, and like any Psychic actually works too. They just force anything up, and because you don't have like a Psychic energy engrave, then they're like, oh, you don't have Psychic Embrace live, it's gonna be harder for you to get out of it. But if you have access to the Turo scenario, you can just Turos bounce that Mon back like the Drifloon. That'll not only get rid of all the damage counters and stuff on it, so it's harder for them to like get a cheeky knockout with like a basic or something, but it'll put all of your energy back in the discard. You can reset whatever Mon you just had, and you can just start popping off anyway. Though, as I mentioned, hitting a Gardevoir with this is actually not a bad idea at all. A lot of people, again, will try to chip away at Gardevoir, make her put more damage counters on herself, and then knock her out eventually. So if you can reset her after using her Psychic Embrace in one turn, then it is pretty cool. On to some of the tools that we're playing. Again, blind second deck, we are playing TM Evolution. It's Mirage Step Curlia at home, essentially. It's not as good, but it is still pretty solid. And then we are playing the 1 Hero's Cape as our A spec, as well as the 1 Luxurious Cape and the 1 Bravery Charm. So I'm really not sold on Luxurious Cape. I really hate the card. It kind of sucks ass unless you're going for like the final blow or something like that on a Charizard or whatever. So if I can find room for the damage pump, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the Luxurious Cape. Oh, I'm sorry, I just ended up dropping it. But I'm going to cut the Luxurious Cape for a second Bravery Charm, and then use damage pump, because the thing is about the capes is that they're there to knock out big things like Charizard, but if you use a Bravery Charm and a damage pump for a single damage counter, it pushes Drifloon enough to be able to do 330 damage, which is, of course, enough to knock out Zard anyway. And that's especially going to be crucial once we hit the Unfair Stamp era of Gardevoir, with Unfair Stamp coming out, or even the Secret Box, honestly. I'm considering playing the Secret Box instead. We're going to cut the Hero's Cape for that. We will have to play the Luxurious Cape in spite of that because of it, but we will be playing a second Bravery Charm and the damage pump as well. Again, it's just going to be really difficult to find stuff to cut. The only stadium we're playing in the deck is Artisan. I was experimenting with Temple of Sinnoh because there is a Lugia player and like some other decks that do get affected a little bit by it with their double turbos, but it didn't really feel like it was super impactful enough. Artisan I actually also wasn't playing for a while there because I don't like giving my opponent Artisan in this day and age, but getting access to things like your Screamtail and your Fluttermane and your other like little basics that aren't able to be searched off of Poffin is pretty important off of this. Plus, we're also only playing the 1 Nest Ball right now to make space for other things, so Artisan's not the end of the world. Plus, you can always just get rid of it off of Vacuum if you really care that much. Speaking of Poffin, moving on to the items, we have 4 copies of the Buddy Buddy Poffin. Such a powerful card. Honestly, just much better than Battle VIP in this deck, because you're not really playing anything like the Zacian or anything else like that you would want to get off Battle VIP. So, like, everything is essentially accessible off the Poffin that you could ever need, especially when it comes to setting up your Ralts and your supporter mons like Mimikyu. We're also playing 3 copies of Ultra Ball, 1 Nest Ball, and 1 Heavy Ball for the additional consistency they provide. So I know not everybody is on Heavy Ball, like in like every deck or whatever, but I feel like every deck could benefit from Heavy Ball as long as they're playing basics that they really want. So I just try to weasel Heavy Ball in like every deck I can. I think it's really nice in this deck to grab an extra Ralts, like the Memory Skip one if you really need it, or again, things like your Mimikyu, your Fluttermane, or any of your other Floodgate supporter mons. And then the Nest Ball is mostly here for like Greninja, because that's like the only thing you're really fetching off of it most of the time. Everything else feels pretty standard though. I'm also playing 2 Super Rod, because getting access to things like your Drifloons or even your Gallade and stuff again later on is really cool, or a Mimikyu in a late game when your opponent only has an EX or a V. 1 copy of Switch. This was 2, but I ended up dropping it down to 1. Mostly just playing it because if you do get boss trapped, it's really good. Also, especially, you do have to respect Snorlax at least slightly. 1 Earthen Vessel, because this is a key part of the Arven stuff. 1 Lost Vacuum, because there are a lot of decks that are significantly hindered at my locals by Lost Vacuum. I mean, we have multiple Moon players now, like multiple Moon Dunsparce players that get hit by it. Again, with the Gallade combo with it is really nice. And then we have, you know, things like Future Box, or Hands Turbo, I should say. You really want to get rid of the heavy batons there, stuff like that. We're also playing 1 Counter Catcher, always a really great card, especially in Gardevoir, because you do like to play from behind. And finally, 1 Pal Pad. In order to recycle are things like Bosses, Turos, and Iono. And finally, rounding off the deck, I'm only playing 9 basic Psychic Energies. I feel like this is also pretty standard. I don't think there's too much to say here. I feel like 9 is more than enough because you're not really going to be needing all of them most of the time on like a Drifloon or something like that, and I guess unless something's juiced with a Hero's Cape, but even then, I think the most you can equip is 8 anyway, so I don't really think you need more than this. And that's going to do it for my Gardevoir deck profile for this format. Really, really love this deck. I'm so excited to keep playing it. Even though I am getting Lost Tina in the mail, you know, slowly but surely, I might just end up playing this at my League Cup event at my locals anyway, because I think that it has a really good chance of actually standing up to top decks. I'm really excited to keep getting results with this deck, and I really hope that we just get more and more good support for it in the future. It's very rare when Gardevoir like isn't a super viable deck. It's been at like several different world championships, funnily enough. But I really hope that we end up getting some more, like, little bit of goodies here and there. Maybe a new, really strong Gardevoir would be really nice, or, I mean, definitely need a replacement Curlio once Refinement rotates, but that's going to be for a while. I think the deck's still pretty cool, but that's just my opinion. Let me know down in the comments below, because that's going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as I'll put this video and channel into the YouTube recommended, and if it's content or somewhere like the rest of my Pokemon content, be sure to check out the channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because support your channel or anything else, and it's absolutely free, and we're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2024. Also, be sure to check out the channel if you're interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! Content as well. Also, you want to support me directly with getting some awesome TCG merchandise in the process, check out Tapio cards and link down below, use code Aurora5 for 5% off your purchase at checkout, and support me financially. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.